Welcome everybody to Halloween Heads. This is episode 2. So any of you who got a chance to check out our first episode, we're a couple of podcasters who came out from or we were from Horror Heads, and we decided, we're going to do this thing on YouTube, and we're going to just focus strictly on the Halloween franchise. So welcome. I'm Mark, and this is my buddy Shannon, childhood friend. We've been together. We've been friends forever. What, like since third grade?
Yep. Forever, man. Long time.
Here we are, and we're going to be talking about Halloween movies with you all. So I hope you all are, Michael Myers fans, the Shape fans, and ready to go.
It's going to be too awful long where we're going to be coming up on like 40 years of friendship, dude.
That's crazy. Yeah, that is so funny. Yeah. I can't believe it. Yeah, it's funny how, I don't know if I've mentioned this in probably in one of our episodes of something that what we did, but we were friends back in like third grade, fourth grade, and then you took off in seventh grade, and then all these years later, here we are in our mid 40s still talking. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Same shit we used to talk about back in
Yes. That's the funny part. The exact same shit. Like, it's like nothing, like time never stopped, or time did stop. We're still talking about Halloween. I mean, gosh, we've been talking about this forever.
Like a couple of crazy old men now instead of just the craziest stupid kids,
Exactly. So for episode 2, we're going to dive into one of the unproduced screenplays. I know any of you Halloween fans out there, that there are shit ton of scripts that were not produced. Probably I'm trying to think here. Halloween Returns, that's another one that I'd like to do eventually. There's the Halloween 3D, that was going to be the follow-up to the zombie movie. But today we're going to do Halloween 4, what was going to be the original Halloween 4, the Dennis Etchison screenplay. Never came to fruition. Had this have been the next movie, this would have been a John Carpenter film, which is he wouldn't have directed it probably, but he would have probably produced it, and he was connected to it, and this was kind of where they were going, so it would have kind of flowed a little bit better, I think, in my opinion.
You think it would have flowed better than what? I'm curious. Than the part 4 than we got?
Than the part 4 that we got, because Halloween 3, it was a big change, but at the same time it was still Carpenter's team. You could tell, the music, obviously, the production quality, the people that he had involved in that. This would have been the next version, like, okay, it would, their whole idea of like, let's make this into an anthology and no Michael Myers, that wouldn't have, that didn't work. Nobody wanted to see a Halloween movie without Michael Myers. So this was John Carpenter's version of, okay, fine, whatever, we're going to put Michael Myers back. This would have been like that typical Carpenter film. Whether or not would it have been as good as the previous ones? Hard to say, but it would have had that feel.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have had the same feel at all, but it's weird if you actually read the script, like overall, like some of the ideas are like, oh yeah, that would maybe work, but I couldn't ever, it's like this script as it's written, there's no way I could see this as a movie, like really? A John Carpenter movie, or in any movie really.
Okay.
It's just, for one thing, like, why are there so many damn characters in a Halloween movie anyway? Why do we need like 84 like main characters, and then like your 2 main characters, Tommy and Lindsay, they're kind of really not even in it as much as you would expect them to be, because they have 85 other characters that they're trying to fit into it, because for whatever reason, Dennis and I would assume John, because they probably came up with this idea together, instead of like, oh, okay, cool, all right, we already told the story of like this house over here and this house over here. Oh, and then we told the story of the hospital. You know what? Now we got to tell the story of Haddonfield. the entire town. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, you know, when you think of it.
Yeah.
And there's so many subplots in this script. Like, why do I mean, it's like everybody has a subplot too, you know, it's just subplot after subplot after subplot. And it's just, I mean, there's a lot that they're trying to squeeze into it,
Yeah.
you know. And to me, like, I don't know that this would have been like, it's a, like, some of it would have been like really cool, you know, but like if it would have actually got made, I don't know if it would have been any better than what we had to begin with. Because there's, you know, I mean, we probably wouldn't have went the Thorn route, but I'm sure I mean, we would have went some other route that would
Well,
have been the same thing, you know.
well, you know what? There's some beginnings to the Thorn route actually in this screenplay. And again, like, just to let you all know, the movie obviously was never produced, so we are totally talking about the screenplay that was going to be Halloween 4, the Dennis Etchison script. But yeah, there are actually some themes that, like, you can see, like, where the Thorn elements could have possibly worked. I mean, it could have, who knows, you know, after this one, the Halloween 5 could have been, I don't know, there could have been a Man in Black or whatever if you wanted to really dig into it. But I want to start with the intro to the screenplay. So I thought, I actually, you know, it had been a while since I read this, and I thought it was so cool. So the intro is the Wallaces, so Lindsay's parents, you know, Lindsay Wallace, as in the little girl that Jamie Lee Curtis is babysitting in the original film. Her parents are at a Halloween party, and
Hey, well, hold on here. Let's take a step back, because Lori was originally not babysitting Lindsay in the original film. Annie, it was babysitting Lindsay in the original film.
that's right.
And Lindsay was dropped off at Lori's, not even Lori's house, at the Doyle residence, you know. So I mean, Lori wasn't the one babysitting. Not that it really matters in this story, but
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
you're absolutely right. Absolutely.
and it kind of goes to, it actually kind of funny, because when you think about it, there's parts of this movie that remind me of the 2018 thing when they're trying to, which is actually funny, they're sort of doing the reverse, because Lindsay's like, oh, I don't remember anything, but everybody else is like, whoa, that night was so traumatic for you, you can never remember anything about it. And when you think about it, she was like an 8-year-old kid that was around the, you know, the boogeyman for what, 4 minutes or something.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, her and Tommy, they were in the house there for a little bit, and then Lori's like, get out of the house. And so then, you know, they were gone, but they weren't in part 2 or anything, so it's not like they had extended amounts of trauma or anything. But,
yeah, and that's another thing with this one. It is an extension of part 2, unlike 2018,
right,
where it you know, it follows the sequence of events with the hospital and everything that happened in part 2. But yeah, no, I think, you know, okay, so Lindsay was originally watched by Annie, then she's watched by Lori, and the intro is her parents are coming home from their Halloween party, and they see all these sirens and police cars, and the neighborhood's, you know, getting blocked off, and the, you know, Mrs. Wallace, she's freaking out, like, oh my gosh, you know, what happened? And she runs up to her house and goes up to the front door, and I don't have it in front of me, the script, but something like where she's able to, the door becomes like a, you know, she can walk through it basically. And then she sees Lindsay up on the top of the steps, and Lindsay's holding a knife, and then Lindsay like peels in half, and it turns out to be the shape comes out of her. And this whole, like, and it turns out to be a dream, and it's such a cool intro. But I wanted to bring this up because this film was this script was the draft that, you know, that you and I read was 1986. So this is a couple of years past the original Freddy, and I think probably Freddy the second one. This is like a freaking Nightmare on Elm Street right here, and that is exactly what they're going for. And you could, and it's so interesting that you can see that, like, the tone of horror went from like the campground slasher, neighborhood slasher. Now we're entering into like more of like the surreal dream world, spiritual stuff that Nightmare on Elm Street brought onto the scene in the mid to late 80s. And that is what this movie is about, in my opinion. It's like,
Is about ripping off Nightmare on Elm Street.
to some degree. Yeah, it's got that feel. It's in, or like one of our classics or one of our favorites, Hello Mary Lou. It had that feel to it. It's like kind of that like whole, bringing somebody back from a dream state or a spiritual world or whatever. And that's what this is. It's a 1986 screenplay. So that's where horror was going right at that point.
I don't know that horror was going at that point. I think John Carpenter was trying to rip off Freddy Krueger, basically, is what I think it was. I mean, that's what they were doing at the, that's what Friday the 13th did to Halloween. And then Halloween kind of did it back to Friday the 13th a little bit. And then Friday the 13th did it back to Halloween. And then jump forward to 1986. And John Carpenter's like, oh, well, let's make this movie. What's popular? Oh, that's right. Freddy's popular right now. Let's rip him off.
Right. No, I agree with you. Yeah, it really was like it changed. It was a change. It wasn't just like the stalker, killer walking around the neighborhood killing people. And now we're getting into more of this sort of supernatural thing, which, and to be honest with you, and this is kind of why I like this screenplay, the original Halloween hints at it. It never really goes there, but the idea that this guy can get shot 6 times and then he disappears. To me, that sort of hints at this idea that that's where we're going eventually. If we continue with this story, we're going to see that Michael is more than human. And this one seems like a natural progression for that. That's why I liked it. But going into the Nightmare on Elm Street thing, I wanted to bring this up to you and tell me, I don't know if you caught this or not, what your thought was. So this movie is 10 years after the events of the original film, which is, that's like the original Halloween 4 came out 10 years later. So like we're talking like 88. So Lindsay and Tommy are, the kids that, grew up in the little kids that were being babysat in the original film are now teenagers. And now we're focusing on them in this story. And they still live in the same houses, and they're both across the street from each other. And and Lindsay's parents don't want Tommy calling, and they're upset, like, oh, stay away from that kid, he's no good. Tell me if you did not get Nightmare on Elm Street vibes. This is totally like Nancy and Glenn, like, across the street, the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, except for the weird reason of Lindsay not being able to remember and Tommy could. And the best part about it too, not only could Tommy remember, but Tommy was going to therapy. So Tommy was getting help. But for whatever reason in 1986, the geniuses that were Dennis Etchison and John Carpenter were like, no. We don't want kids getting therapy. We don't want to put that on the screen. We got to make that look bad. That's naughty. It's like, it's kind of a weird thing. Like in today's world that a kid is being punished by somebody else because they're going to therapy because they had a traumatic experience and they're getting help for it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you don't want to hang out with him. He's a bad seed.
Right. Yeah. Like they totally like, yeah, that Tommy kid, he's like, he's seeing a psychiatrist. You better stay away from him. But yeah, I mean, but I totally got like, I'm like, as I'm reading the screenplay, I'm like, holy shit, this is Nancy and Glenn. I mean, kind of reverse in the sense, because it was Glenn's parents who were like, yeah, stay away from that Nancy girl. She's no good. And we don't, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is a natural progression from, Halloween 2 and maybe even Halloween 3 to some degree into the mid to late 80s. And we've got this supernatural kind of thing going on. And it's like, Freddy kicked in, and now horror has changed at that point, because you didn't get like, in the early 80s, you got all the Halloween clones, you got My Bloody Valentine and Maniac and whatever else. And then all of a sudden, like towards the mid to late 80s, you get all the Freddy clones. you know, because Freddy was a new big thing. So you get like, um, well, you know, Hello Mary Lou, that was like basically a Nightmare on Elm Street clone. And, you know, this Halloween 4, that's really what they were going for.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I did like, you know, one of the things I did like about how they described Tommy's room, you know, they do this, he's like talking about how there's like all these horror movie posters. He's obsessed with Fangoria. And I was like, this is a great movie. You know, it's funny because this is the kind of movie you see nowadays. Like they're trying to get this like retro thing going, like Stranger Things and what have you. And you get like the teenage kid, and you look in his bedroom, and he's got like, you know, Halloween or Friday the 13th posters up on his wall. And it's like, yeah, this is like the real deal back in the day. This is, you know, that's what they're going for. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. Just like it would have been like either one of our rooms. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And didn't he say something about like paper clippings? And I know that they're probably talking more about like, you know, the murders in Haddonfield of Michael Myers. But I
Oh
think,
yeah, I'm sure they weren't making a scene in the movie of some little kid cutting out horror movie coming attraction clippings from the paper. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but
Although I mean, if you look at Friday the 13th Part 4, you know they do have that weird stuff where you know you have a 12-year-old kid like trying to pass off that he's making all these Stan Winston like style Tom Savini grade, you know, masks as his own. Hey, look at what I made. I
yeah,
made this all by myself.
yeah.
I don't think he did, dude.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. And then we had some returning characters too. We had Detective Hunt from Halloween 2, and then obviously Sheriff Brackett, you know, and then we kind
Oh,
of,
and you forgot Marion Chambers is in here too, even though she's got a different name.
yes, absolutely. I was going to get to that, you know. I wasn't sure if that was her at first because, you know, but I figured like, yeah, that's got to be the same person. They just, you know, she must have gotten married in between part 2 and this one.
Old Marion Chambers, the probably the most reoccurring character in any horror franchise. If you go back and look at some of all these unused scripts and stuff too.
That's cool. Yeah, she's a weird character because you look at the original Halloween, and you know, she's only in that opening scene when they go to pick him up, and you know, obviously he steals a car and whatnot, but then somehow she returns in part 2 as the one who reveals to Loomis that there's the brother and sister connection.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Halloween Kills, obviously we go all the way to now.
Yeah, you know, I'm surprised though, even after like this came out or was rejected by uh what's his face? The producer guy, I can't remember think of his
uh
Mustafa.
God.
Yeah. If he was completely against the idea of having it be like Tommy and Lindsay again, or if that was completely off the table, because that would have been, you know, maybe not the best story, but even like if they would have somehow worked Tommy and Lindsay into the sort of the Friday the 13th story that we got, or not Friday the 13th story, the Halloween 4 story that we got anyway, you know, maybe had like Lindsay be Jamie's like older, like whatever mentor instead of the whatever her name was, the
Yeah.
girl that, you know, I can't remember her name right now. I haven't seen part 4 in a while. But yeah, I'm telling you though, if this movie would have came out, I'd with all the supernatural stuff and knowing you and knowing your love for the original and stuff, there's no way you would like this movie if it ever came out. You would hate it as much, if not more, that you already hate part 4 as it currently is.
Yeah, that's funny. I think about that at times. Like, would I have hated this one? I mean, I certainly wouldn't. It doesn't live up to the original at all. I mean, none of them do. But yeah. Oh, another thing I wanted to bring up too is, and I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, was I don't know what it is about these Halloween movies, but they are like, if you look at Halloween, that franchise, at least the early franchise, and then you look at the Jaws franchise, there are so many freaking similarities. It's like they just kind of, like if you look at Jaw, the shark is the slasher killer, Michael Myers, and then and then you just see like the small town environment, and you get these same characters back, the sheriff and whatnot, and sheriff's kids, and how that all works out. But one of the taglines of this new movie was going to be, just when everyone thought it was safe to go trick or treating again. And I was like, oh, okay, I know that tagline. I'm like trying to think, where did that come from? And oh, it's Jaws 2. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. So it's the
Too funny.
same kind of deal, And so those, like, and I've talked about again in our previous episode, was that like Halloween 2 is kind of like if you liked Halloween, well, this is a little bit more of that. Same with Jaws and Jaws 2, and then the sequels as they moved on kind of got a little weirder and weirder. But yeah, there's definitely a comparison there that I see, like, from with those two films. Absolutely.
Yeah, this one, I don't know. This one, like, if they would have made it the way that the script was, it almost seems to me like it would have been, if they would have continued on, like it would have been another way for John Carpenter almost to get away from Michael Myers again. Like, oh, he was this weird supernatural thing and we killed him off in the last one, so let's tell a different story this time. Or like having the Lindsay and the Tommy characters, like, this spoiler alert, run off at the end, with no destination in mind. Definitely setting up for a possibility of like, oh, maybe we'll do a sequel with these guys over here or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, going into that, like what you were talking about, I know you were saying, like, kind of like the different aspect of this film, and how it was going to be a lot different than what we saw later on. Again, this is like, late 80s. Freddy's been out for a while. Well, yeah, because script was written in 86, but it would have been probably released in 87, 88, somewhere around there, like the original Halloween 4. But we're talking about going into this more supernatural tone, but at the same time, Friday the 13th was still kicking at this point, and that was more kind of the slash and stalk kind of thing, where the killer in the woods, killing whoever he comes up to, and but there were some spiritual elements of that, like Friday the 13th Part 7. You had like the Carrie versus Jason kind of concept. But I did want to talk about what I did really think was really fucking cool about this screenplay. And I don't know, you may not be into this at all, but I was absolutely blown away. The scenes where Marion takes I guess it's like a news crew or whatever, and they're trying to come up with some some stories for Halloween. Takes them into Smith Grove Sanitarium and plays the old Dr. Loomis tapes. And basically what we find out is that Michael Myers, yeah, he was this kid who killed his sister, but then what happened was Dr. Loomis got obsessed with this kid, and he was like, yeah, you're this, like, this evil monster, and you should be you're this, you're not human. And he just keeps like going on. So for he was, whenever Michael Myers, what was that, like he was age 6 or whatever, until he escapes, he's got his psychiatrist in his ear telling him he's like this basically this supernatural monster. And the concept is that basically because Loomis was saying that to him, he became it. And then he was like, okay, I guess that's what I am. I guess I'm this like crazy, killer. I guess. So he escapes at 21 and goes on this rampage. And that to me was just sheer brilliance, in my opinion, writing brilliant. That's such a cool flip, in my opinion. What were your thoughts on that one?
So yeah, again, it takes away from the original and stuff, and takes away that Michael is just pure evil from the original, and he's nothing but evil behind those eyes. And then you come to find out, supposedly 10 years later that nope, it was Loomis just poking and prodding at him to turn him evil, which takes away from what John Carpenter wanted him to be originally. I mean, you're shooting yourself in the foot when you're like, when you sit there and bitch and bitch and bitch for what it's been, well, going on 45 years now that he's been bitching about, that he didn't want to make any sequels and he
Yeah.
wanted to be done after the first one. And then you're going to make a movie 10 years later. No, just kidding. He wasn't really evil at all. He was a product of the system,
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying with that. I guess I guess my only opinion would be, if you're going to continue making these films and you have to come up with some reason for, some extra stuff in the story, this kind of adds to it, in my opinion. It's like, it's kind of a different twist. But then it goes right into like the whole idea of what, like, they talk about how like all the patients in this insane asylum start to worship Michael and think he's this like, pagan god or whatever, which connects back to Halloween 2 when they talked about, the Sam Hain references, and which was really the beginning of the Thorn thing. If you look at Halloween 2, really started it all. And then, but this kind of carries it into a different direction, which I think was better than where it ended up going. Like 4, 5, and 6, the ones that were released, took it into a kind of a weird place. But this one kind of, in my opinion, it's more psychological, and it makes it more like, oh, it's because this was, projected onto this kid. He's this monster because his doctor's saying he is one, and everybody believes it. So I just thought that was cool. I mean, when like the whole Lord of the Dead thing and the whole thing with the, I don't remember exactly what it says, but like basically like the patients like basically worshipped him and thought he was this god.
Right. Yep.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I didn't think it was that cool.
No,
I mean,
you didn't buy it, huh?
No, it just creates a plot hole,
Sure. I get what you're saying. I mean,
it's the thing that we always said, like, about the thing that was always great about the Friday the 13th franchise compared to all the other franchises was the thing that they always, especially for the first like few, was they always told the story of how Jason became Jason. And they never really veered off of that, really, ever. I mean, the story changed a little bit, but it didn't really change that much. Even when they remade it in 2009 or whatever, they still stuck with pretty much the same original story. And then, but all of these other horror franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, hell, the Halloween, they have 18 freaking timelines anyway. Doesn't matter which way you're going with that. But I mean, the Nightmare on Elm Street ones too, they, in Leatherface, all of them, every movie that comes out, and then they're like, all right, we're going to retell the origin story and we're going to change half of it every time. It's every time. And it's like, what's going on with this? And it's just like, yeah, it's to me, it was kind of dumb. If you're gonna, I mean, if you want to add to it, but don't change like the biggest like thing of the, which I guess if you're gonna do that, then sure, you could say like, oh, Dr. Loomis was just saying to everybody that he was pure evil because that's what he's been telling them for all these years. But I don't know, to me it just like takes away sort of like one of like your biggest issues with Rob Zombie's Halloween. Now all of a sudden you're getting a little bit of a peek behind the curtain a little too much, and then it takes away that mystery.
Yeah,
you're taking the mask off, as you hate to see.
You're right. And I agree with that, because like, again, that's why I think at the end of the day, you look at the original film by itself and it works the best that way. And then when you start keep adding things like the brother and sister angle, then all of this stuff that we're talking about, it does kind of, it sort of dilutes it a bit. But yeah, I agree with you with that. I guess I just, looking at this film, or the screenplay, like these some kind of cool concepts, in my opinion, that yeah may have taken away from it a bit. But in my opinion, I think they may have been better than what we ended up getting.
Yeah, and the other thing too, like the biggest like kind of like turn off from the screenplay, eh, whether it would have been that way if it was filmed or not, but it seemed like all of the kills were directed to be off screen.
Yeah, that was weird. Like you're right. Like, and I wanted to get into that about the kills. But yeah, it like, they show like a knife, like swing up in the air or whatever and flash down, but you never really saw what happened. Um, that's one of the things about this screenplay that, like, okay, so far I've been pretty pro, this Etchison screenplay. I thought I enjoyed it. I really liked, reading it, but where it falls short, in my opinion, is the kills and some of that. Like, this is a Halloween movie, right? And like you said, like a lot of the kills are off screen. Another thing, it takes up to page 62, so we're talking over half of the film before we get our first kill. And that's a long time. I mean, that's a huge lead up to our first kill, and that was the DRC, whatever her name is, in the pumpkin patch, which was kind of in my opinion, I thought that was kind of a cool kill, but at the same time, man, at page 62, really? There's no way that I don't think that would have worked. Like, you look at the Halloween 4 that was released, and you've got those kills right away instantly when he's escaping.
Right. Yeah, especially when you're getting, I mean, I can see some of the, maybe they were writing it that way with it being with the thought that, hey, it's 1986, the the ratings board is like really cracking down on some stuff. I mean, look at Friday 7 when that came out. I mean, that was, if that came out today, that'd be what, PG-13, if that. But if it was kind of written that way, like, hey, let's just write it this way, so that way we can, punch it up later or whatever. But yeah, the being more than halfway through the movie for a kill that would be hard for a horror movie. I mean, could you imagine if they would have came out that way? That everybody would complain about that, like, oh yeah, that one, you got to wait half of the movie before we even
Oh
see
yeah,
anything.
absolutely. I think it would have people would have really hated that. I think that I look at the script, and there would have needed to be a lot of work to really make it work, in my opinion. But yeah, like waiting that long, and so you get that one kill in the pumpkin patch, which was kind of cool. And actually, I think I was reading an interview on Halloween Daily with Etchison, and he talked about that whole. So this first kill is basically in a pumpkin patch. Okay, so Halloween's banned in Haddonfield. I don't know if we mentioned that yet, but so you can't get pumpkins or costumes or anything in Haddonfield. You have to cross state line to go get it, or town line or whatever. And so one of the teenage girls, she goes over across town line, and she sees this pumpkin patch, and goes to get a couple pumpkins for this party that they're going to. And Michael Myers is basically underneath a pile of pumpkins, and he slowly rises and kills her. And that's sort of the beginning of his return or whatever. But yeah, it takes too long to get to. I don't think any slasher fan in the mid 80s would have wanted to wait that long.
No, not at all. No, and it's funny too, like the whole no Halloween and Haddonfield thing. I
Yeah.
mean, this script, it's funny, like when you read it now. And the first time we read it, it must have been, man, it had to have been a few years ago. I wonder if it was before 2018 came out or not. I don't remember. I'd have to look back. But anyway, like, it's funny though. It kind of reminds me of again, like if this script was written now, like I would say, oh, that script somebody watched Footloose after they watched Halloween 2018, and then they were like, oh, I have an idea for Halloween 4.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what the first part of this movie reminds me of, is when, like, not just like Lindsay's parents with like, oh, you can't talk to him and stuff, but like everybody's like, oh, sheriff, are you going to make sure Halloween doesn't happen? And it just was very reminiscent of Footloose. I was just waiting for Kevin Bacon to start dancing in some like abandoned warehouse or something, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. So yeah, I mean, it definitely was a change from what we, what we got. I mean, totally different type of horror movie, more cerebral. And actually, that is the reason why it did not get made. In the interviews I've read, Carpenter basically, came to Etchison, who he actually, I don't know the history of this guy, but somewhere along the lines, he liked him as a writer, I
Well, he
guess.
did the novelizations for part 2 and part 3.
Yeah, he did 2 and 3, but before that, they were doing somebody did a novelization for The Fog, and Carpenter and what's her name, Deborah Hill, didn't like the story, the way the guy was writing it, so they said, okay, we'll get somebody else to do that. So that they hired Etchison to do The Fog, and then that's how he got the job for 2 and 3. And then he said, hey, we want you to do this Halloween 4 screenplay, and they brought it to Akkad, and Akkad, who, he's a businessman, he's like a movie guy. He was like, nope, yeah, I don't want to do that. It's too much of a cerebral thing. I want to do like your typical Michael Myers in the flesh, killing people kind of thing. That's the formula I want to use. So at that point, when that happened, Carpenter basically sold all of his rights to Halloween, and then, he was never part of it again until 2018, where he did obviously the soundtrack, and, whatever the producer role he had with it.
Sticking his hand out, waiting for a check.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yep.
yeah, I wanted to get into a few things too, towards like, okay, so the big climax of this film is at this drive-in, and they call it the Lost River Drive-in, and it's actually brought up in Halloween 2. I don't know if you remember, but the nurse, there's that scene where the nurse and the couple of the ambulance paramedics are hanging out in the break room, and the one nurse is like, hey, so and so saw Michael hanging out at the Lost River Drive-in. And it's so weird because that for some reason that stuck in my head. I was like, that'd be really cool, like some scenes of Michael Myers like stalking around in a movie theater at a drive-in. And then when I read this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I would have wanted to put that in a script if I wrote this. But so anyhow, the climax of the film is this drive-in scene where everybody's going across town line to go see some horror movies in the drive-in, and that's where the shape comes in, and we get this kind of weird massacre, if you want to call it that.
Could you imagine living in Haddonfield in like this time where you're not allowed to, like, it's so weird. They're like, oh, we're going to ban Halloween. And there's like banning like all of this like stuff. Like, oh, you can't go see movies. What? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
worse than like, oh, you can't have a dance or, whatever. It's like, oh, you can't trick or treat. You can't dress up. You can't watch horror movies. You can't talk about Michael Myers. You can't do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's so horrible.
Yeah. So weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird.
And correct me if I'm wrong too. Isn't there part in this where when they are like towards the climax of when they're like, I don't remember exactly when it happens, but don't they kind of like hint towards the fact that Michael like somehow like grows to be like a giant, basically?
Yes. Okay, that's what I wanted to get into. So all of this screenplay, everything I was like totally into, yeah, I'm buying this. This would have been a cool movie. And then they get this scene where, so basically everybody, all the kids are hanging out at this drive-in watching these horror movies, and the shape is in there. And I don't know how, like, it's kind of a weird time lapse or whatever, because a few people fall asleep in their cars and they wake up and movies are still going, but then a few people are gone. And then and like the characters are like looking in the cars and they find their friends are dead, and this kind of weird thing like where there's a lapse of time where we don't really like, I don't know, if you go hanging out with your friends, you're probably not going to fall asleep, even if it is late. I don't know, just that seemed kind of weird. But yeah, so anyhow, the cops surround this drive-in, and Sheriff Brackett, Deputy Hunt, and I think there's a few other that come in, and they start shooting at the shape. There's like this kind of showdown at the end. And as they're shooting at him, I guess the way it's described in the screenplay is he absorbs the bullets, and he grows, and he's like getting larger and larger, and he becomes like 12 feet tall. And that's where you lost me. Okay, I was okay with like the supernatural, spiritual stuff up until that point. Then I was like, yeah, I can't see Michael Myers. Like, I can see that happening to Freddy. You're shooting him and he's growing, and his arms are like, that scene in the first movie where his arms are really long.
Right.
But to do that to Michael Myers, I think that was a little hokey. So, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, he grows to, they say, about 12 feet tall. And then there's like a big explosion in the drive-in, and some of the cars catch on fire, and he kind of disappears.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you're almost led to believe. It's like not led to believe, but it's almost like he just like the dude from Big Trouble in Little China, the one guy that gets so angry and he's like puffing up, and then he just like pops. He gets so big. That's almost what it seems like what happens with Michael on this one. Like he's just like taking all the shots, and then it's like hulking it up or something, just getting mad, just like and just a poof, and just like blows up. Because that's the like kind of the gist of the end of the script is that he's gone, and like the curse is lifted, or what so you're led to believe, and Tommy and Lindsay are like gonna run off into the sunset and live happily ever after.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of a weird ending like that. Like apparently he's destroyed, and the idea was that the idea of the shape and all of this were, it's like if you focus on it too much, it comes to reality. And then, but at the same time, it's like, well, okay, so did they kill him or what happened? Like, everybody's like so focused on this, what's going to happen with him. And then he comes into reality, and then he's gone. And it is kind of an abrupt ending in that sense. Like you don't really get like an idea of what's going on behind the scenes. Like you said, like Tommy and Lindsay kind of head out into the sunset together, and then we've got that's it.
Yeah, it's just for me overall, it was like there are some good ideas in there, but it just doesn't hold up, as a whole. It like just doesn't work for me, for a horror movie. I mean, if it would have been something, which we've said this before, 100 times, but if you would have called it something else and taken out, the name Michael Myers, and had it been anything else, then it probably would have been a cool movie. But having it be a Halloween movie, it doesn't work with Michael Myers being in there, But if you could have had it been, John Carpenter could have made this movie, and it could have been Halloween. It could have been some other time of year, even, and just okay, we're gonna have this town have something tragic happened, and the town itself, like, collectively rebirths this evil because of their belief of it, and not had it been Michael Myers, then it would have been like, oh, that's cool. And then you could have had the scene at the end where the thing, is absorbing everybody's energy because they believe or whatever, which again is kind of a Freddy thing, which, that's how does Freddy lose his power? When you stop believing in him. And but then it would have been a little bit better of a story. It would have been a little bit more believable, which probably is kind of, like I said earlier, which is kind of probably what John Carpenter's idea was. Like he probably had this idea in his head, like, hey, let's, this is the idea, Dennis, let's write the script. And then, oh, we got to throw Michael in there to make make them happy. And then they were like, what? This is not a Halloween movie. Let's not do it. So yeah, it's weird. It's, it's one of those things. We talked about some of the other Halloween screenplays too, and it was sort of the same thing. It's like good story if it was outside of the Halloween universe, but it does that idea doesn't work within this universe, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it definitely takes it into the more supernatural elements of horror. I did like I'm reading the screenplay and it's just like in my mind I'm seeing like there's all the neighborhood stuff where like kids walking to school, and you got the scenes in the high school, and I'm in my head I'm seeing like the original Halloween, I'm seeing A Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm seeing Hello Mary Lou, and all the all those films, and it's like a total 80s horror film, always focused on high school, what's going on in there, focused on the neighborhood, like middle class suburbia and all that stuff. And it was like, man, I could totally see this would have been the next film if Carpenter was involved. It just totally connects right back to it. But yeah, you're right, it definitely was a different take on it. So whether it have worked as a Halloween movie, I guess we'll really never know.
Yeah, maybe somebody, I don't know, I wonder what the legal ramifications are if somebody were to, turn this idea into like a fan film.
Oh, that would be cool.
Or if you couldn't do it because it was already, I have no idea like what, if somebody could come after you and be like, whoa, that was actually a script that, but it's like one of those weird things like, hey, that's a script that we didn't ever actually make into a movie. So shame on you for making it and then not making any money off of it, kind of a thing.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, though, it really does feel like a John Carpenter movie, which I thought was cool. Like where, Halloween 4, 5, 6 and everything beyond that never felt like a Carpenter film. It felt like a slasher film. And I think part 4, what we did get, in terms of how they tried to light the set and the tone they tried to bring, they were trying their best to bring it to that Carpenter tone, but it wasn't fully there, whereas this movie, this could have been like Carpenter's next movie easily, whether you put Michael in or not, he was kind of going in that, in that area with these type of movies where I could totally see him doing something like this. But
right.
Oh, one last thing I did want to bring up though, and I thought was so cool. So this group of teenagers, they want to go scare everybody in the drive-in, and they go and they get all these masks. And in the screenplay, they say they put on these Kirk masks that are, what did they? I think they said they were silver. And so I'm assuming basically that the masks, okay, so going into the Halloween universe, we have to assume that Michael Myers found this white mask that just happened to look like Captain Kirk and whatever. So it's, they're using that idea that there's these masks that exist in this universe that look like that. And like, Ben Tramer from Halloween 2 wore one. And it seemed like that was what they were kind of going for, is like they had these generic shape masks that basically were silver and looked like what we saw as Ben Tramer wore, because they didn't describe them as white. And to me that was cool. That was kind of like, okay, so to be honest with you, and this is where my mask snobbery comes into mind, had they have gotten a Kirk mask for this film, it would have been better than anything, up and beyond this and all. As long as they got the right mask, I would have been totally game for it.
Ridiculous. Yeah, you would have been game for it. You'd be like, that's a great movie. And then like 3 days later, you'd be like, man, that's the worst movie of them all. Oh.
No, you gotta get me a mask that looks like this. As long as Michael looks like that in the movie, I'm 70% with you. If you give me anything other than that, I'm gone. I'm like,
yeah, but he looked like that in 07's Halloween.
Close. He was very close, and that's why I can kind of sort of look at that one and watch certain scenes and be okay with it because of that. But you got to give me this. If I don't have this, I don't have a Halloween movie. That's how it is.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
Well, I guess we should probably wrap this. So at the end of the day, I'm going to let you know. I guess we'll do like a little review or like, our thoughts. We kind of, I mean, obviously you all know what we think of the screenplay. We just spent an hour talking about it, but overall, I'm going to give it a 2 thumbs up. I enjoyed the screenplay. There's some flaws. The 12-foot Michael Myers, I don't think I would have bought into, but other than that, I would have loved to see this thing come to fruition.
Oh yeah, not me, man. Not me. I stay on the page where it belongs. I mean, it's a kind of a fun read, but it wouldn't have been a good movie, I don't think. It
So
would have been worse than Resurrection, probably.
you think so?
Oh, easily.
So you're giving it a thumbs down then?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
12-foot Mikey's not for me.
I agree with that part of it. So, well, thank you all for coming to check us out. We are going to, well, we'll probably come up with some kind of way that you all can get a hold. Well, if you want to make a comment, just please comment below on the comments on the page here, and let us know what you think.
Cool.